Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, My So-Called Healthy Life. Okay, today we're gonna talk about something completely different. I was asked on my main channel, Peter Monn, to do a response to the rapper Lil Peep's overdose and death. And I tried to film it, and it just never seemed to come out right. It just didn't come out the way that I wanted it to be said, and I didn't want to talk about other YouTubers. I didn't want to talk about social media influencers in there. I just really wanted to talk about how sad it was, what had happened, and that it continues to happen. So if you're new to my channel and you don't know who I am 45 years old, and I have been sober since December 17th of 1994 when I was 22 years old. So I've been sober for almost 23 years. I have lived around addiction my entire life. I am a big believer in predisposition for addiction. I believe I was born an alcoholic and an addict. And from the word go, I think it was crazy town for me. And I loved everything about it. I loved using. I loved desperation. I loved the dark nights. I loved the craziness, the chaos, the insanity, all of it that went with the addiction. Further down the road, when I got sober, I started working in a treatment facility, and I would hear about kids that had overdosed that we had once a month, maybe once every other month or something like that. But I'd worked there about 6 years when it directly affected me, and I had a patient that I had in an aftercare program that I ran, and I got a call on a Saturday afternoon from his mom. And his mom said, "Can you come to the hospital? He's been rushed to the hospital." And I said, "Absolutely." And so I ran to the hospital, which was right next door, and I went into the emergency room. And when I walked in, his mother was walking out, and she said, "He's gone." And I could see them like working on him still. And she said his addiction was too strong. And he had died of sudden sniffing death syndrome. And he was huffing computer duster and diving into a pool to intensify the rush. Now, what you need to know about this particular young man, whose dad has written a book about this, and they very vocally talk about it, and at some point I might specifically talk more about this, but that he was in my aftercare group, and he was getting regular drug screens. And the reason that he was huffing was because he was afraid that marijuana or pills would show up on a drug screen. Every other kid in the group knew that. And so the week after that, when we talked about it, they told me that, his fear of being caught on a drug screen and having to go to, a more intensified program is what forced him into these different areas, right? Over time, working in the treatment program, I would also see these cultures that cultivated around certain groups, and it was really, if you've ever worked in a treatment facility, it's hard not to stereotype, because you do get the goth kids, and you get the skater kids, and you get the hip hop rap kids, and you get all of that, right? You get the country kids, and that listen to, and they listen to country music, and they love to drink and smoke weed and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of the country kids is where all the pills came from. And then over time, it seemed like it kind of just all meshed together. And you really couldn't figure out anymore, when you would hear somebody's story, where their road might take them. But I will never forget going to that young man's funeral and seeing all of these kids, dressed in suits and ties and dresses and looking beautiful. And then finding out days later that they went back to the gravesite and they poured alcohol on the ground and they left a joint out there for him because let's just get high one last time on him. If you haven't heard of this is like a true thing. This is something that I heard consistently through working through treatment. I mean, hundreds of times kids would tell me, "Oh, we went to so-and-so's gravesite and we smoked a blunt out there and we got fucked up and ate Xanax and, Xanny bars," they would say, and all that kind of stuff. So, to flash forward to 45 years old, and I am now a YouTuber, and I'm being asked to comment on the passing of a young rapper who has allegedly died of overdose of Xanax, which, by the way, is hard to overdose on. It's interesting to me. It's like it kind of all fits together in some weird way. But it makes me very, very sad, nonetheless. I don't shame anybody for their feelings or their emotions in reaction to that. I only ask that going further that, YouTubers, social media influencers, anybody that has any kind of finger on the pulse of anything that's going on with youngsters out there really realizes the power that they have, and they cultivate it and they use it in a positive way. They don't put out a message of rampant drug use, because they are role models. We are all role models. Each of us is a role model to somebody. And what we do and how we behave and what we say is watched very, very closely. I worked with teenagers for 13 years in private practice and another 7 years on top of that. 13 years in a treatment facility and another 7 years on top of that. And one thing that I realized, and I knew this to be true of myself when I was a teenager, right? I've never been a huge believer in peer pressure. Like, nobody forced me to use. Like, nobody said, come on, you're going to eat this pill. Now, people would say to me things like, you haven't tried this before? Come on, try it. And I'd be like, no, I don't want to. Oh, come on, just once. And I'd be like, okay. But they didn't, force it down my throat. But I will tell you one thing that I really believed in, and that was the way that cultures of use affect people around them. And what that means is, if the culture that you live in, if the culture that you aspire to be part of, if the culture that you see yourself in, okay, if drug use is part of that, drug use will some way become part of you. Whether you like it or not, you will either be affected by people that are affected by drugs and alcohol, or you yourself will be that. So for example, okay, it does not surprise me that tons of musicians out there that talk about smoking blunts and doing this and whatever, right? That all of these young people out there are doing the same thing, okay? And do I think it makes them into addicts? Absolutely not. I don't think so at all. Do I think it helps the process and it enables the process? Absolutely. And I want to be no part of that. I want to send out a positive message about how to change your life and how to be sober and all this kind of stuff. And one of the tweets that I saw that somebody put out there said something about Xanax by itself is not bad and it's not Xanax's fault. And that is true. But when do we stop talking about abstinence? About the abstinence, the fact that abstinence can save lives. And I think that there needs to be more education going on out there. I mean, we are talking about YouTubers, musicians, movie stars that have millions and millions and millions, okay, of people following their every move. And they're putting out there, in a line in a video or a line in a movie or an action on a TV screen or a lyric in a song, why it's okay to use these things. And they are role modeling for younger people what that life looks like. And young people sitting in some sad apartment in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, are looking at that going, I want that. That's who I want to be. This is my easiest way there. Well, the sad reality is that many of those kids don't ever make it out and won't. And I saw many of them in my treatment facility. Many of them today are still in and out of prison. So I can't tell you the countless amount of funerals I have been to. I have been to literally hundreds of funerals of overdoses. And not any of them were ever expected. It's always the one that you don't think it will happen to. And I have said in my videos over and over and over again, this will catch up with somebody sooner or later. It breaks my heart. If you are a YouTuber out there or you are a social media influencer, please use your platform for something positive. Stop talking about rampant drug use all the time. Take a look at your own substance use. Allow yourself 30 days to not use anything and see if you have a hard time with it. If you do, you might really have some kind of substance abuse issue, and you might be the next one. Love yourself and care enough about yourself to try and see if you need some help. If you're somebody out there, a kid sitting and watching my video, or a YouTuber or somebody out there that has a friend or a family member that has drug and alcohol problems, find them help. Find them help tomorrow. Do not be afraid to piss somebody off at the expense of saving their life. Their life is way too important. I didn't really want to make this video today because I didn't know how to do it in a way that would, not ruffle feathers if I talked about these social media influencers and all that kind of stuff, but that's really not the message for me. The message for me is the fact that we need to start talking positively, okay, about lifting people up instead of using these drugs and alcohol references to tear people down. You know, people ask me all the time, they're like, what do you think about the decriminalization of marijuana? I'm totally for the decriminalization of marijuana. As an addict, as an alcoholic, and as somebody that has worked in the field, I am totally for the decriminalization of marijuana. But just because marijuana is legal does not mean that I can walk in a cannabis shop and buy it and be successful. The same way that just because alcohol is legal does not mean that I can walk in a liquor store and be successful. It's not about that. It's about what happens with the substance when it goes into my system. And when it goes into my system, bad shit happens. And I don't want bad shit to happen in my life anymore. And I don't want bad shit to happen in any of these people's lives anymore. And I sure as hell don't want bad shit to happen to some young kid out there that just wants to be like his idol. I love you guys, and I will talk to you later. Bye.